Hello, I am Professor Smita Sehgal from Lady Shri Ram College, University of Delhi. Friends, today we are going to discuss a theme on Post Mauryan India. I am going to confine myself to the political developments in this period. I'll talk about the general background of Post Mauryan time and then specifically on the Kushanas. In another lecture, I would take up Satavahanas and look at the economy and society also. But let us start with a very basic question. What is post-Mauryan period? Well, is it correct also to use the term post-Mauryan? Actually, this is a period that lies between the two empires, the Mauryas on one side and the Guptas on the other side. In a sense, yes, I am making use of dynastic appellations, which may not be politically correct today, but friends, I am doing it only for the purpose of convenience right now. The correct reference should have been the period between 185 BCE to 319 CE, or the end of the 2nd century BCE and the beginning of the 4th century CE. Whenever we take up any historical investigation, friend, then we have to look at its time period, what I have just referred to. The second most important thing is to look at its locale or terrain. So if I am referring to a particular period, then what exactly is the terrain that I have in my mind? Well, in this case, I'm looking at entire Indian subcontinent. In north, this was a period that saw the rise of various indigenous dynasties and also the coming of the foreign rulers. In central India, it was the beginning of the Satavahana rule. In South India, this period is associated with the Sangam period. So, let us also try and look at some markers of the period. You know, there are certain points by which you can identify that this is a unique period. So, if you were to look at the markers, first important thing is about polity. We find that this is a period marked by political fragmentation, as I just mentioned, and this is also a period when many foreign rulers came, invaded parts of India. But as far as the economy is concerned, friends, this is a period that is associated with expansion in agriculture, both in the fertile and not so fertile areas. Massive increase in production is what we can gather from the sources at our disposal. Along with that, there was also an expansion in trade. Indian traders participated in global trade network along the Silk trade route, also in West Asia, Southeast Asia, and there was also a greater intra-regional trade at this time. That is, when I speak intra-regional trade, I'm talking about trade between north, center, south, and so on. Apart from that, as far as economic development is concerned, this is a period that is associated with growth in urbanism and a prolific currency use. In fact, in terms of early Indian history, this is the period that is marked by very high level of monetization. And when I talk about monetization, what I imply is that people at the lowest levels also started making use of currency and moved away from a simple barter system. Socially, this period was marked by increase in practices like untouchability, consolidation of subcastes and jatis, and also from a gender perspective, consolidation of patriarchy. Now, when we are discussing, as I mentioned, doing any historical investigation, we have to be familiar, A, with the time frame, B, with the locale, and 3, the most important thing is the kind of sources at our disposal. These are just the axioms. You know, this is where we first put across the table how are we going to approach the topic, and then we start with the topic. So in terms of sources, there are a plethora of sources for this time period. Literary sources are there. For instance, we have Manu Smriti, Gargi Samhita, Mahabhashya of Patanjali. There are certain references in the Purans also. And let us not forget the very famous Arthashastra. Most of the time, we look at Arthashastra as a text for the Mauryan period, but there are so many books in Arthashastra, friends, and some of them actually pertain to the post-Mauryan time. Along with that, there are a number of Buddhist sources also, for instance, the Jatakas, Divyavdan, Mahavastu, and Milindapinyo. Milindapinyo, the last one, is a very famous work on dialogic exchange between the king Menander, who's called Milinda, and the Buddhist philosopher Nagasen. So this is also referred to as the questions of Menander. What is interesting is that amongst the Buddhist sources, we start getting sources that are written in Pali as well as Sanskrit at this point in time. Among the foreign accounts, the Greco-Roman accounts, we have the very famous, the Periplus of the Erythraean Sea, which we often refer to as the Periplus alone, because it's a work which is by a navigator. His name is not known to us. He's a Greek navigator. So often the term that is used is the Periplus. But we have Ptolemy's Geographica. We also have Chinese sources which relate to the hand rule. So there is actually no dearth of references from outside India also. Now, the later accounts such as Kalidasa's work of Malvika Agnimitram or Banabhat's Harshacharita also mention the period. They may be a little later in time, but there is a recall in terms of a memory recall, a historical reference. We have very famous Prakrit works also. So friends, I've talked about the Sanskrit works, the Pali works, and now the Prakrit work. Prakrit work, the very famous, especially in the Deccan region, is the Gatha Saptashati, or Satsai as it is also referred to, and it is attributed to Hal Satvana, the very famous ruler of Satvanas. In South India, this is the period that is associated with the Sangam age, so we have the Sangam corpus with us. This is as far as the literary sources are concerned. Now coming to the archaeological sources, there are epigraphic accounts, donative epigraphs, especially from Mathura. Mathura, we also get references to Ayagapattas, Jaina Ayagapattas from Kankali Tila. Then we have land grant inscriptions which are attributed to generally to Satvanas, and we have got it from the Nasik caves. We have the very famous Rabatak inscription, which is a Kushana inscription, which is there in Afghanistan, which has helped us decide the chronology of the Kushana rulers. We also have the Nanaghat inscription, the Junagadh inscription. Junagadh inscription is specially a reference to the Shaka rulers, and many others also. I've just picked up a few here. When it comes to the numismatic evidence, we have a very, very rich repertoire. As I mentioned, this was a period that was associated with high levels of monetization. So we have a variety of coins, gold coins, which are Indian gold coins, Indo-Greek, Roman gold coins, beautifully sculpted silver coins of Bactrian Greeks. We also have copper coins, potin also. Potin is like an alloy. It's a silver, copper alloy. It's called Bilan also, if you know about it. And this was generally in lower denomination and used by people for the daily works. Now, sculptural remains also are there. We have life-size figures at the Nanaghat caves. Apart from that, we have figures of Buddha, Bodhisattvas, both in the Mathura form of art and Gandhar art. And apart from that, we have, sculptures of Vishnu, Shiva, Parvati. Sometimes their representations come even on the coins. So when we look at archaeological sources, we have talked about epigraphs, we have talked about coins, we have talked about sculptures, but there is another very important material remain that we need to take into account. And these are the archaeological, I would say, plant remains, the crop remains that have been found from a number of regions. One such example is from Sanghol, from where we have got evidence of wheat, rice, barley, pulses, cotton, and so on. And these kind of evidences are important because they help us recreate the material milieu, not only of the kings and the queens, but people at large. And so very, very important to understand the nature of our sources as well. Okay, now coming to the post-Mauryan period. As I mentioned, post-Mauryan period was something that was marked by political fragmentation. As the narrative goes, the last of the Mauryan ruler, Brihadarath, was killed by Pushyamitra Shunga, who was the Senapati, and then he established the the Shunga dynasty with its capital at Vidisha, which is in Madhya Pradesh. Shunga Empire was quite constricted compared to the Mauryan Empire, which was huge, which was humongous, but it was not as if it was a very, very small empire. It had its focus in the Magadhan region, and there were battles that they carried on towards northwest and Kalinga also. So generally speaking, we say, and Shungas are generally understood to be the champions of Brahminical rule. We have references, they are glorified in the Puranas. In the Buddhist sources that we have, we get reference to their destruction of 84,000 stupas. That's the kind of impression that is given. But when we look at the archaeological and art sources, we find that that may not have been the case, because the Baharut stupa that you have has had its expansion. It's a Buddhist site, but has had its expansion during the Shunga period. So the possibility of extension of support to Buddhism may have been there. We cannot overrule it. But overall, as we understand, this is a period associated with some kind of fragmentation, and archaeologically also we can say that new areas were coming up. They have left their remains behind them. We have after Shunga rule is generally combined with that of the Kanav rule. Both the Shungas and the Kanavs who followed Shungas fought numerous wars. They campaigned against kingdoms of Vidarbha in North Deccan, fought against Indo-Greeks in the northwest, and this is especially for the Shunga rulers. Shungas are also known for having extended their campaign in Kalinga area, and Shunga kingdom overall comprised region between the Gangetic Valley up to Narmada. It included cities like Patliputra, Ayodhya, Vidisha, and possibly Jalandhar also, and Sialkot, which is there in Pakistan, today's Pakistan. Within 100 years, their kingdom was reduced to a territory of Magad. Obviously, there were constant warfare. And as I mentioned earlier, they were succeeded by yet another Brahmin dynasty of the Kanavs, who lost power around 228 BCE. If you look at the picture here, friends, you can see where the where the Shunga rule was concentrated. And in fact, this picture also gives us an idea about where the Satavahanas were and where in south the Pandyas and the Cholas were. That's exactly what Indian subcontinent might have looked like way back in what we refer to as the Post Mauryan times. Now, this period was also known for the emergence of independent principalities, especially after the decline of the Kanavs. Many independent principalities or kingdoms emerged, which are often referred to as tribal states. They're really not like tribes, but they're small kingdoms, and often instead of monarchical traditions, there would be oligarchy that is followed as a matter of polity there. These included those at Ayodhya, Ahichhatra, Mathura, Kaushambi in Madhya Pradesh. And there is an opinion by the scholars that these so-called tribal states may have been independent in the pre-Mauryan times. They would have got subsumed within the empire after the Mauryans took over, but after they declined, and especially after the Kanavs also declined, the possibility of their becoming independent once again. Arjuneas, for that matter, is yet another small principality that emerged in the area around Jaipur region, while Audambaras came up in Punjab between upper courses of Ravi and Beas. Kunindas acquired power in the region between Beas and Yamuna, stretching up to the foothills, that is the Shivalik area. The Trigartas held power corresponding to the area close to, modern Jalandhar. Yodhayas occupied modern-day Ludhiana, Ambala, Karnal, Rohtak region. Agastya controlled regions west of Yodhayas. I have given you so many names, you may be getting confused about it, but the intent is only to show that it was not as if there was a political vacuum that came up after the decline of important dynasties like Mauryas, Shungas and Kannavas, there were other smaller kingdoms that got breathing space, that emerged in their own right in this area, and many of them followed not monarchical traditions but oligarchical traditions. Apart from that, okay, let us first take a look at this map. If you look at the map, you find that you can see Yodhayas there, you can see Arjunayas, Kunindas, so many. These are the territories where they emerged on Indian subcontinent. Now, what happened in northwest India? Northwest India was a place from where the Indo-Greeks emerged. In fact, after the decline of the Shungas and Kannavas, there were a number of ruling dynasties that came from Central Asia. First to cross the Hindu Kush were the Bactrian Greeks. They are called Bactrian Greeks there, and once they have come to India, they are called Indo-Greeks, who are also referred to as the Yavanas in Indian literature. Many Greek settlements had come up during the time of Alexander and Seleucus. Around 206 BCE, Seleucid ruler crossed Hindu Kush mountains, defeated the Mauryan ruler Shubhagasen, and in the 2nd century BCE, Demetrius, son of Euthydemus, pressed further into India. We have this particular map, if you can see. There is this particular map which gives us an idea of the control of the rulers in the northwestern region. We have numerous numismatic evidence of Indo-Greek help, which help us to construct their political history also. Names of many Indo-Greek rulers are known only from their coins and not from the literature available. Large number of kings within a relatively short period of time came up in this area, and this suggests that some of them may have actually ruled concurrently. That must have been the political system out there in Bactria, in the Oxus region, and they possibly continued even in the Indian subcontinent. Overstruck coins indicate either hostile relations between the two rulers in question or the fact that one of them succeeded the other. Let us recount some of them. We had Demetrius I, Demetrius II, Apollodotus, Pantaleon, and Agathocles, who were responsible for extending Bactrian rule to the south of the Hindu Kush into the northwestern India. A protracted feud between the ruling houses of Euthydemus and Eucratidas began after the reign of Demetrius I. The base Nagara inscription, this is the base Nagar pillar inscription, very, very famous at Vidisha. It suggests that the rule of Antiochus extended up to Takshashila, as his ambassador Heliodorus is described as a native of that city. Many Indo-Greek rulers led successful campaigns into India, but one such whom we need to remember, and I'm going to spend a minute or two on, was King Menander, who reached Patliputra. Menander ruled from 155 BCE to 130 BCE and brought about stability to the Indo-Greek Empire in the northwest. His kingdom comprised areas of Swat Valley, again that's in Hazara district, today it would be in Pakistan area, and also certain parts of Punjab till River Ravi. Menander, or Milind as he's known, as I mentioned earlier, is best remembered for his conversion to Buddhism and his discussions with Buddhist philosopher Nagasen, which are recorded in Milind Panyo or the question of Menander. You can see the picture here. This is supposed to be the head of the king Menander. He is very fondly remembered both in Indian subcontinent and in Central Asia. What was the impact of Greek rule? Now, Indo-Greek failed to establish their authority for a very long time, but their rule was impactful. They were the first to issue the coins in large numbers, first to issue coins which were stylistically superior to any other coin manufactured in India till that time. Earlier we had the silver punchmark coins and copper punchmark coins, and the cast coins also came up, but they neither had legends on them and neither had portraits. That came up only with the Indo-Greek coins. These coins are important to us both from the perspective of understanding the monetary history as well as I mentioned earlier, political history of the period. Indo-Greeks also introduced features of Hellenistic art that culminated in the Gandhar art form in Indian subcontinent. Now, Indo-Greeks were followed by the Scythians in the northwestern region. They are also known as the Shakars or the Kshatrapas, and they were actually, technically, Scythians were a tribe of Central Asia and had been displaced by UHEs. We'll talk about UHEs in a moment, but before that, who were Scythians? They were tribal people. They first attacked Bactria and moved into Iran, and then Greek territories in India and displaced the Yavanas. They faced resistance only from Ujjain king Vikramaditya, who commemorated his victory against the Scythians in 57 BCE, and that's how the Vikram era starts. The very famous Vikram Samvat starts. They extended their rule up to Mathura. The first important Shaka ruler was Moga, who was there around 80 BCE and is known from his inscriptions and coins. He possibly established a stupa in Takshashila. Gradually, there were eastern extension of the Shaka rule also. 4 inscriptions from Mathura, which are ascribed to 15 BCE, inform us about the presence of the Kshatrapa and Mahakshatrapa. The names are Rajuvula and his son Shodash. Here they must have ruled as subordinates of a superior authority, but there is a possibility that a hierarchy between them also existed, because one is called Kshatrapa and the other is called Mahakshatrapa, and Shakas were in conflict with Satvanas. I'll talk about this in some detail in the second part of my lecture, so I'll meet you after a while. Thank you.